Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn session for this week. I'd like to begin by welcoming the traditional owners and custodians of the land, and I also pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Each week, as those of you who have attended before will know, we talk to a different on-ground specialist. And today we have Sam Witteveen. Priscilla Moca will be talking to Sam from MRPV about implementing recycling in every pavement layer on the M80 Sydney to Edgars freeway. So I'll throw over to Sam and Priscilla. It looks like people are still coming in, but we'll kick off anyway. Thanks.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl.
I guess we'll start the session, Sam, by hearing a little bit about you and in your role in delivering the M80 freeway upgrade.
Yeah, sure. So Sam Witteveen, as Cheryl mentioned, Senior Project Manager out at the M80 upgrade. I've been on the M80 upgrade really since tenders closed and the tender evaluation a couple of years ago now. I think we awarded a contract towards the end of October. So I'm on the M80 upgrade since then. Me personally, so prior to that, I worked on a few pretty high profile jobs, including Chandler Highway upgrade, Swan Street Bridge, and spent a fair bit of time at DOT prior to that. So yeah, really excited to be on the M80 upgrade and coming towards the end of it at the moment.
Tell us a bit about the project. Obviously, it's a freeway and probably quite familiar to our audience if they're from Victoria. So tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, so the M80 is 38 kilometres long. The upgrade that we're doing sits between Sydney Road and Edgars Road, so 3.8 kilometres of that, which is about a tenth of the road. Really critical part of the network between essentially the Hume Highway, cuts through the interchange of the Hume Freeway and through to Edgars Road. The project itself involves upgrading capacity for a large section of that road, so additional lanes. We widen and extend the ramps, include ramp signals and smart freeway management systems for the corridor. And between the section of Hume and Edgars, we've also added a couple of braided ramps, so new bridges, RSS walls, retaining walls, noise walls, new pavements throughout, upgrades to drainage and shared use paths and all of those things. So quite a bit involved in a really important strategic part of the network.
Cool. And tell us a little bit about the recycle and reuse materials that have been used on the project. I've heard you guys have been described as having, that being the first project to incorporate recycled materials in every layer of the road pavement. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, look, we're really proud as a project of what we've been able to achieve in terms of recycled material across all our works. We've from the early tender discussions, we had some really robust and really lengthy discussions around what we could do and how we could incorporate recycled material. I think it's a great opportunity across industry when you've got a project like this to really showcase what can be done and try to test the boundaries as far as we can. In the pavements in particular, so our pavements are essentially made up of a type A capping, and then in the original pavement design, some crushed rock, cement treated crushed rock, and then a number of layers of asphalt, which I'll go through each of them if you like. The type A capping, probably just before we started our bulk earthworks, we recognised that we we're going to be sending quite a bit of spoil off site, and we're able to send that to a facility nearby, have them process that and come back as a registered type A capping mix that came back on site with a mix of recycled materials through it, and a lot of it was our own waste essentially that potentially could have been otherwise diverted to landfill. So things like brick and concrete rubble and things like that mixed up through it, still processed with a fair bit of care and making sure that we're getting all the requirements of what a type A needs, so that we are providing that really strong foundation for the road. The next couple of layers are probably more traditional things that we would do and have been doing for a long time, but potentially not monitoring as well and keeping track of our records of how much we do it. But the crushed rock is a pretty straightforward replacement with crushed concrete that's coming through a lot of the waste, concrete waste from different construction sites as well. The cement treated crushed rock layer, very similarly, we changed to a crushed concrete. That has a blend of other sort of virgin materials in it as well, and starts to form the base of our pavements. But again, a really strong foundation for each of those for the road, and recycled materials through all of those to really as high as a percentage as you can go under the specifications. And then we talk about our asphalt. So our asphalt, we sort of started asphalt works prior to the new release of DOT's Section 407 spec, which now brings up the level of reclaimed asphalt pavements to 40% in an SF layer. So we were able to get 40% in all our SF asphalt. We also changed the sand products to a recycled glass within that asphalt. In the intermediate layers, it's probably the most challenging one we had. We had an SF asphalt layer in the original design. Now it took quite a bit of time and work and testing and proof to make sure that we're going to get the design life, but we were able to ultimately change our SF asphalt to an SI with 30% wrap, which again significantly increases that recycled content. But we're also able to do prove that that we're going to get the quality outcomes that we needed. We're not going to compromise on the design life. We're going to change from one product to another, but still make sure that we're not creating an ongoing sort of maintenance liability in the future. And that was a really critical one for us, because we've now seen that adopted across other projects across the state, which has been really pleasing to see. We then took that a step further and also introduced Reconifelt through that layer. So through the binder, there's an addition of that's been developed specifically for a number of asphalt pavements, and the Reconifelt means that we're introducing recycled sort of toner cartridges and rubber and plastics and things through that binder and through that mix as well, to not only get the 30% reclaimed asphalt, but also start to get some additional recycled materials in there. On top of that, we've also now placed some type H asphalt, which is 20% wrap and Reconifelt as well. So we're into the wearing course for a lot of the job now, and we're doing some final work at the moment with our open graded asphalt, which includes recycled glass sand and potentially includes some crumb rubber through the binder. So we're just still talking to industry about the possibility of bringing that in, and it's looking really promising for us too.
Awesome. And you mentioned that some layers or incorporating some recycled material was a little bit more difficult than others. What sort of barriers were you facing during that process?
Yeah, I think probably a number of different ones on a number of different fronts. So the type A, as an example, when you're using a recycled material, the consistency of the material can be quite challenging and quite difficult to get in that type of material. So we're sending spoil off site. Sometimes it's got brick in it, sometimes it's got concrete and other rubble and rock through it. So making sure that we're getting the consistency of gradings and also getting optimum moisture content and that sort of stuff. So when it turned up on site, we could place it with confidence and make sure that we're going to get the product that we need and getting that consistently. So that was probably a pathway and a journey that took us through the contract that gradually got better, and we really saw industry respond to our requirements and our expectations, and that product really improved across the life of the work. The asphalt one, so the SI asphalt that I spoke about, that's probably, to change an SF asphalt to an SI is probably not something that anyone had done before. So to be able to do that and also provide certainty and confidence that it was still going to perform in the way that an SF asphalt would perform once you introduce the wrap, and then also go further and do some tests with Reconifelt. That was a pathway through the department that I think they rightfully wanted to really challenge us on every step, to make sure that we're not going to ultimately build a pavement that we're gradually just taking a little bit off the design life every time we do these things, but we're actually giving us ourselves and the state confidence that we're going to get a design life and a pavement that's going to last for 25, 30 years plus and continue to serve its purpose for a long time into the future.
Cool. And probably one thought I did have was, at the start of this process, when you're, when you're deciding, oh, these are the sort of recycled materials that we want to use, I mean, who's involved and how do you sort of get it from idea to reality? How hard is it? Well, what's navigating that process like?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So in the tender evaluation for us, we came a little bit before the recycled first policy, and I think that probably sets the boundaries a little bit clearer in terms of what the contract is proposing to include, and having some clarity up front on what they can and can't. For us, we were aware that policy was coming though, so we had some conversations prior to awarding the contract about what was already included in the contractor's bid, what recycled materials were they allowing for, what could they potentially allow for on top of that, but may be subject to some changes in standards, or maybe subject to some additional costs or other things. So we had that conversation, but we also wrote some special conditions into the contract to reflect the criticality of that to us, and the importance of that from a project perspective. So those expectations were set pretty early. We've also had ongoing sustainability committee meetings monthly with the contractor, where they're driven to achieve an ISCA rating as part of our project, but we're also tailoring those conversations to bring back and really challenge the question of what else can you do in the recycled material use. So I spoke a bit about the pavements, but we've also had some really great outcomes on glass sand bedding and recycled stabilized glass sand in certain applications, on Enviro Mesh and Ecologiq and those sort of things, where we've replaced sort of the steel reinforcement in footpaths with plastic fibers and that sort of stuff. So we're seeing some of those benefits and some of those things come right across the project, not just in the pavements as well.
What sort of of the initiatives beyond asphalt, what sort of stands out for you as a bit of a highlight, or something that you didn't think prior to this project that you'd be seeing?
I think one example is probably potentially, and it's got some other implications too, but potentially the replacement of a lot of the cement in our barriers. So we've had a 50-cent cement replacement with fly ash for the most part in a lot of our concrete barrier applications, and that fly ash is otherwise a waste product and used in our barriers as a recycled material instead. And in the back of my mind, I think where we're heading in the future is a little bit of not just about recycled material, but also having the overlay of carbon emissions and our energy targets and that sort of stuff. So yeah, look, I think that's to get 50% through our concrete barriers is a great place to get to, and a great initiative that we'll see a lot more of in the future, and we'll probably see that be challenged a lot more too, with Portland cement sort of contributing to so much of the carbon emissions that we see. So I think there's a real future in some of those sort of discussions too.
And what were the suppliers? Like, obviously, you guys work with the contractors and they tend to work with the suppliers, but was it a collaborative process where you came across barriers, or was it pretty, they dealt with it and come back to you guys? How does that sort of work?
I think across all the applications, the suppliers in the market and probably everyone really recognises the importance now of taking that next step and thinking about those innovations and thinking about how they might set themselves apart. So it wasn't so much as challenging the market, it was really having the market challenge us in some of the situations where there's more that can be done, there's more products out there, there's more innovation that's coming through technology that they're pushing forward. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily difficult to find to new and innovative products. I think they're out there, and I think there's some pretty good marketing happening of those coming forward. The challenges we found are more then how do we implement them into the project? How do we get them on the ground? How do we make sure that we're not compromising on maintenance standards, and we're not putting products out there that are going to create longer term issues, and demonstrating that to the department so they know that they're taking on assets that are going to be there for long term and not going to create a longer term liability.
And how has the M80 upgrade challenged your perception of recycled products? Do you think it's improved your perception of them and you're more likely to use them, or how's that changed? Yeah,
absolutely. I think in the past we've used them but never really monitored and never really driven the amounts and the volume, and we've probably never really reflected on whether we've done as much as we possibly could, or we've just done what makes sense from an economic perspective. I think now we're really starting to see a shift in the way we deliver our projects, but also how industry is responding and how the department's expectations are changing to say this needs to be the new normal. where what we've been able to do on the M80, I think for our next project will be the baseline, and then we work up from there and see what more can be done. So yeah, we didn't necessarily get everything over the line that we had conversations around on the M80. I think there's always more that we could do, and there's a whole heap of constraints around timeframes to turn things around, and around value for money. If there's some additional cost on measures, then how do we leverage sort of the industry and the market to bring some of those costs down and create competition. And but I think the more we see of this, the more it's going to become the new standard and the baseline. And like I said, then it's just about looking for further opportunities on top of that.
Okay, and this the M80 upgrade project is one of the first in Victoria to use the 30% wrap to sort of go that extra mile on a more professional, personal level. Like, how does that make you feel knowing you're part of one of the first projects, and now that's likely to be business as usual for other projects?
Yeah, like I said at the start, really proud of what the team's been able to achieve. It's not just me personally, but I've got a team and the contractor and the market and the whole heap of suppliers have worked together really well to prove the performance of that product. So not just to get it down on the ground and say it's a test application, but to get it in for our whole project essentially, and say this is the standard that we'll be working to. So yeah, really proud of what we've achieved.
Cool. And as the M80 project wraps up, what are the key learnings you're going to take around the use of recycled and reused materials onto whatever project you're thrown onto next? What are the big takeaways?
Look, like I said, I think what we've done is the base case for the next project. So I think the learnings really are have the conversations early. There's everyone in the supply chain prepared to have the conversation. Everyone respects and acknowledges that we've got all this waste going out to landfills and the like, and there's a great opportunity here, particularly on these big projects, to incorporate it. But the earlier you have the conversation, the earlier you bring those innovations and those products into the conversation, the better chance we've got of then taking them through and getting approvals and changing standards and making them sort of the normal and the thing that we do going forward. So yeah, certainly the earlier the conversation, the better. And I guess I think that's probably the real key for us to then have that conversation and then ask what we can do more.
Probably our final question before we move into taking questions that have come up in the chat. Do you think that the same ethos can be applied, depending on the scale of the project? So bigger, your northeast links down to your smaller sort of couple of lane upgrades. Do you think it's the same sort of thinking should apply? Yeah,
look, I do. I think the smaller projects have got just as much opportunity in them in terms of a lot of the recycled material, particularly through pavements and that sort of thing. What we've done is set a standard where they can be used anywhere. They're now registered mixers. They're well known. They're understood. There's an acceptance and a confidence that they're going to perform for a long period of time. So the scale of the project doesn't really matter in terms of the application of some of those products. There's probably an opportunity with some of the bigger products to think longer term. So to think about some of what we can do more and really do some more testing and do some more evidence building to give confidence that maybe 30% wrap's not the right number, maybe 40% is not the right number. Maybe you can continue to push that envelope, but you can't do that without building confidence over a period of time. So it probably takes some of the bigger projects to really take a lead on those where there's a little bit more time and a little bit more lead availability to have the conversations. But there's no doubt the smaller projects can also take on a lot of those challenges and thinking about where the timeline sits in their program to go, okay, we've got 6 months for a particular application. That's plenty of time to do some testing, to challenge the market, to talk to the department and get some things through as well.
Great. So it sounds like, starting early and, not limiting your thinking and exploring those opportunities are the ways to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We might move on to the couple of questions that have popped up in the chat. So our first one is in from Thanu, who says, has there been any difficulty in achieving compaction requirements?
I think the short answer is no, generally. So I mentioned in the type A, there was some challenges, particularly around optimum moisture content and that sort of thing. So inconsistencies of what we were getting out of plants. But But we resolved that over a period of time. We haven't had any major concerns from compaction. We do all the normal tests, and we probably test a bit more when we're using recycled material to really make sure we've got that proof and evidence there. But in terms of the asphalts, if you look at them as they go down, you probably wouldn't notice the difference. For the most part, once it's coming through out of a truck into a paver, it looks black and it looks like asphalt. And it's coming up with exactly the same sort of compaction and testing that you'd expect.
Cool. And the other question that's come up in the Q&A before Cheryl takes it to the chat questions, Miles has thanked us. Thank you, Miles, for joining us. So what type of documentation did you have to provide to DOT to give them reassurance around long-term durability? Did you do accelerated weathering, etc.?
Good question. Different for every product, really. So there's no simple and straightforward answer. I think the important thing is to have the conversation early with DOT and understand what their expectations are. I mentioned earlier, I worked for the Department of Transport, or Vic Roads, for quite a while before the inception of MRPV, and I worked in maintenance teams as well. So I sort of led the pavement and routine maintenance teams at different times, and the importance of getting that right is critical. There's no doubt that you need to get design life when we're building these major projects, and we need to get the absolute best product that we can in the ground so that the maintenance budgets aren't tested going forward. In terms of its assurances, so I mean, the asphalt's probably the ones that we did the most testing on, and we really leveraged the relationships between our contractor and the asphalt supplier to make sure that testing was done. Their experience and was sort of utilised, and they were directly involved in the conversations with the department as well to make sure that the technical expertise was there, and we got a degree of confidence not only of what was being proposed, but how it's going to be tested and how it's going to be proven. And we did all that up front before applying it in the ground.
Fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, we've got a couple in the chat. Damien Copperali, thanks for the share. Great use initiatives. Is reclaiming materials at the end of service life possible with mixed recycled material blends? For example, reclaiming aggregates from asphalt, incorporating glass. Is it possible to separate sort waste streams for stone aggregates, glass, not suitable or for reuse and requiring disposal? There's a couple of questions in there. Do you want me to break them up a bit? The first one was, the first one was really around, is reclaiming materials at the end of service life possible with mixed recycled material blends? For example, reclaiming aggregates from asphalt and incorporating glass.
Yes, I think it's the short answer. With our reclaimed asphalt pavements, so that the pavement comes up the same, whether it was an original 0% recycled mix or whether it's had wrap through it. There's still testing of it done in the plants, and there's still quite a few extra requirements now on those asphalt plants to make sure that the blending checks are done and the binder viscosity checks are done, and they're adding the right amount of wrap through their mixes and all those sorts of things. But yeah, I don't believe there's any issues with reusing recycled materials. I think that's what the future is going to look like.
Yeah. Is it possible to separate or sort waste streams for stone aggregates and glass? Or is it not suitable for reuse and requiring disposal? I think you sort of half answered that, but.
Yeah, so I mean, the glass is an interesting one because we do use, I think I mentioned recycled glass sand for a lot of our conduit bedding and drainage bedding and that sort of stuff. But you have to use a certain type of glass, so it's not all glass that's suitable. There is some sorting required of that. We make sure we're not using glass that's got sharp edges and going to damage conduits and those sort of things.
Oh, okay.
So there's different expectations on different products, and some products are suitable for some uses and not for others. So yeah, sorting is definitely possible and definitely takes place for a lot of the products that get used.
There are some issues sometimes with some people using glass fines or recycled glass. You've obviously used it in a few places in your work. Did you have any issues?
We have. So there was an issue on essentially some dirty water coming out of one of the conduit trenches with recycled glass. So again, that goes to the mixing and the type of glass that gets used. it was within the material safety data sheets for that particular type of glass. So it wasn't unexpected, but it raised concern when suddenly you see some darker water coming out of a trench. You need to capture it and manage it as you would, and make sure that there's no sort of environmental issues on the back of that. So yeah, so there are certainly some challenges that come with it, but we were able to navigate through those pretty well.
And I imagine that's just like any product that you use, whether it's virgin or recycled. It's a matter of navigating the things that come up.
Yeah, exactly right. There's just as many problems with concrete and that sort of stuff at the moment when we're cutting it and the fiber's getting in the air. It doesn't matter that whether it's recycled or not. So there's those considerations really for any material you're using on site for sure.
Great. Jing is just saying it's great to hear that the M80 sustainability initiatives could form the baseline. Is there a plan to publish the details of these initiatives implemented on the M80 so other infrastructure projects can aim for that as a baseline? I mean, certainly Ecologiq would love to help you with that case study.
We already sort of have started promoting that through Ecologiq's channels, and I know that the M80 team work pretty hard to promote what they're doing on the projects, and whether it's out to the community or out to media or just between industry. Sam, I'll let you jump in, but yeah, Jing, we're also happy to give you access to our knowledge hub so you can see sort of some of these things fleshed out as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think most of the products we're using now, we're now seeing them registered as in-use mixes for things from the department as well. So the Type A is now an off-the-shelf product that you can purchase and use, and it's registered as a Type A capping. The asphalts are very similar. Most of them are either registered or conditional and pretty close to getting general sort of purpose approval as well.
Yeah, Daniel's saying he agrees that benchmarking and case studies and building confidence are really important. And it'd be great to see this developed as a resource. So that's something Ecologiq is part of what we're doing. And Tony Aloisio, our director, is saying the asphalts can be recycled back into asphalt at the end of life, which is the highest value use of this. It's a cradle to cradle solution, which is what we're looking for a lot of those things. Are they considerations you thought about, Sam, when you were doing this? I mean, it's a great initiative given you didn't have the recycled first policy in place. You've done a lot of things on this project. What were the motivations?
Like I said, I think the motivation was socially as a acknowledgement that there's far too much waste going to landfills, and we need to make better use of the waste streams that there are, and there's a great opportunity to do that across the project. So from a project perspective also, the organisation was heading in that direction. It was clear that there was a mandate to get as much recycled content as you could into our road projects. We have a huge opportunity, I think, in our road projects where we're using so many materials into our projects that it just makes sense for us to do it. So yeah, I think the motivation's within that.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam. We've got a last question in, probably without time, just 2 minutes left, from Claire. So Claire's wanting to know, how does recycled glass stack up in terms of value for money compared to other recycled materials?
Well, we didn't pay any extra for it, if that's what you mean in terms of value for money. So there are certainly some recycled materials where we've had proposals come forward and we need to make value for money decisions in terms of whether it's worth spending extra capital to incorporate them and to use them. Recycled glass sand wasn't one of those. So recycled glass sand came out of a supplier at an equivalent rate, presumably, than the sand itself that we'd usually use as a virgin sand. So yeah, if there was costs associated with them, either savings or additional, then our contractor didn't tell us about them. Let's put it that way.
Oh, that's great. Look, thanks, Sam. That's some great questions and some fabulous information. As most of you will know, this is recorded and you can access this through our knowledge share. Our email was on the invitation that was sent out, ecologiq@roadprojects.vic.gov.au. This is actually our last session for this year. We've decided to let people have their Christmas parties, and we'll be back next year. But we are interested in the topics that you might be interested in hearing from. If you have a project that you'd like to share some work you've done that's innovative or interesting and maybe valuable to other teams, please let us know. By the same token, if there's something you're curious about, again, let us know and we'll seek out that project and someone who's implemented that or trialed that and put that into one of our lunch and learns. We also will shoot a survey out Monday just with a couple of questions. We're interested in what you thought of the sessions this year and what value you got out of them. So thank you. Everyone have a fabulous Christmas and a great New Year and a safe New Year. Thanks, Sam. That was a fabulous session, and Priscilla, really good session. And we had quite a few people on. So if there are any questions that we've missed, we'll follow up after this session. But thanks again to everyone for listening, and thanks, Sam and Priscilla.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks.
Awesome. See you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.